Hello and welcome to this session. We're looking now at leadership and management in care, so LMC 1B, team leaders in adult care. And again, we're going to start off on the PowerPoint presentation. So thinking about team leading, and again, think about your role as the manager and thinking about how this links to the Chloe's and CQC and your internal governance. We need to think about kind of roles, models, and theories around leadership. And we need to think about our different kind of terminologies and languages that we use. So we have things like team leaders, we have things like our care leaders, or you might have a senior team leader. You have your deputy managers and then your managers. So when we talk about team leadership, we're not talking about a team leader. We're talking about leadership of teams. So just so we're very clear on that. So we need to think about the role of the manager, which is about following leadership direction, about creating creativity, thinking about innovation, thinking about promoting your services and coming up with new visions and values. And then we've obviously got our leadership, the managers who then follow that leadership style. And for this, it's really about you creating your own understanding of leadership. So looking at those theories and models. And you're going to see lots of theories and models around transactional leaders, transformational leaders, leaders of change, democratic leaders, etc. The one that I'm going to talk about is the inclusive leader. And an inclusive leader is somebody that's able to adapt to all of the different types of leadership types, styles, and traits. And an inclusive leader is somebody which I like to think is more of a chameleon. You're getting used to the fact that I like lots of animal analogies. So what I mean by this, you can adapt to the situation. So you're not necessarily a democratic leader, but you can be democratic if you have time. You might be a dictative leader, but in an emergency situation, but again, not all of the time. So it is about you managing that and understanding that. So when we think about leading your teams, first of all, we've got a couple of theories to look at. And we have Tuckman's theory, where we look at the stages of forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. And that's where we come together. And if you think about TV programs, they do this all the time, Tuckman's theory. They come together and they form. Everyone's getting on. And then there's that fallout bit, and that's the storming. And then after that fallout bit, we get to understand each other. That's norming. And once we're over those hurdles, we get to that performance stage, and then we hit that really sweet spot where we're adjourning and we're being supportive and we'll work on all cylinders. And when you think about social care, you go through that every shift. We go through Tuckman's theory, and we call it the A team. And I'm sure you called it, I'm working with the A team today. And that's normally your longer serving members of staff. They understand the systems, understand what they're doing, so they can go straight to adjourning. If you have a new member of staff, you may be thrown back into storming. Throughout that, part of the role of being a leader is about establishing that trust and accountability. So when you look at your team in the morning and you're looking to that delegation piece and you've got your Tuckman's theory under your belt, you're going to be looking at who you're going to delegate to and how you're going to trust them to do some of their work and make them accountable, because you want to pick up this empowerment model. So we need to communicate openly, thinking about Shannon and Weaver's theory of communication, the sender, the receiver, the coder, the decoding. You need to lead by example. So that's you coaching, mirroring, modeling, and all of those great things. You want to encourage collaboration. So that's your democratic approach. If you've got time for that in the morning, you may need to be a bit more dictative, but a democratic approach. That ultimately fosters that positive environment, which we talked about earlier, about creating those roles and responsibilities where people want to perform because they don't necessarily come to work for the minimum wage, but they are coming to work for that supportive environment. From that, you'll set clear expectations. So that's in line with your company's values, your KPIs for that day, your key performance indicators. You'll ask for feedback. So you'll give that feedback formative and summative, ongoing throughout the shift and hopefully at the end of the shift. And you'll thank your staff. And then you'll do that reflective learning at the end of your day, thinking, okay, well, what went well today and what didn't go so well, and learning equally from both parts of that. So when we're looking at build and maintaining team commitment, we want to lead by example. We need to demonstrate our own commitment and our own understanding of the service value. So it's really important as a leader, you buy into your company's values, that you buy into their mission statements, and you understand the statement of purpose. From that statement of purpose and from those values, you're able to create that culture of continual learning. From there, you can obviously show that enthusiasm and lead by kind of the way forward that you want to be there. And equally, you can express your vision. So what are you looking for as that leader? What are you hoping for your team to achieve in that day? You can share your goals and your objectives, and you can encourage that open communication and collaboration. By doing all this, hopefully what you're going to do is develop a culture, a positive learning culture, and a culture where you can lead by example, where you can establish clear expectations, where you can establish collaboration. You can do some of that recognition and rewards. You can foster that positive development. You can promote that work-life balance, and effective communication, and again, embrace inclusion and diversity. When we're doing that, we need to think about our own leadership styles within that team and how we develop. So think of that forming stage. Leadership approaches look at being directive or coaching, and we want to bring a group together. So we adopt the directive of coaching and that style to begin with to get everyone on the shared goals of the day. Here's the diary, this is the top floor, this is the bottom floor. We need to do this, we need to do that. That's you creating that directive and that forming, getting everybody on board. And again, you'll facilitate those instructions and encourage clear lines of communication. We've got this going on today. Repeat yourself. That's a great technique. And if somebody asks you a question, that paraphrasing back on those questions. So am I right in saying that? Can you confirm what I've just heard? And again, you're going to build on that rapport and set in that collaborative work there. You're then going to go through that storming stage, which we spoke about earlier. And during the storming stage, this is where you get your conflicts and disagreements. When you think about it, your bells will all be ringing in your head. Oh God, yeah, Steve, I every time I do handover, I've got somebody going, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. And that's that storming stage. And that's really about your conflict management skills, looking at how you can turn things around, and get people onto the same values as what's been prescribed, really. And you can create those opportunities for constructive feedback, and emphasize the importance there of mutual respect and collaboration. So when we're managing that conflict, maintaining that dialogue and acting professional throughout. We go through the norming stage with team members, and that's where we establish those norms and values and we work together. We effectively lead, we adopt that democratic style, and we want to promote that discussion going forward. We then think about those strategies for establishing trust and accountabilities within the team. And as I said earlier, that's all about you leading by example. And that's demonstrating that honesty, integrity, and transparency piece. Thinking about who you are as a person, what culture do you want to set, what are your values and what are your belief systems, and how do you replicate that within your leadership style. So, for example, I think mutual respect is a really important thing. So if you've got something to say to somebody, creating that safe space, creating a space off the floor, creating a space where somebody feels that they can have open dialogue with you. And that allows you then to model your behavior. So it is about you then managing your feelings. And if we think about duty of candor, maybe admitting to mistakes or being able to communicate more effectively is about leading by example, because none of us are perfect. And that kind of moves into where mistakes are normally heard, and that's through effective communication. And to foster that transparency of communication, we need to think about encouraging regular dialogue. And when we think about our teams, we've always got the negative Nelly, somebody always sitting there going, oh, that'll never work, that won't do that. You'll always have the person that's up for change and is really active and wants to do it. And then you'll have those sit on the fence. Um, and really, it's about winning everyone around to those ideas. So the more effective you are at communicating and the more you can have regular dialogues, the more you'll work out who it is in the team that you need to bring on board. And that only really happens through active listening. So as we say in the industry, we have two ears, one mouth. They should be used in that proportion. So we should be doing twice the amount of listening as we do speaking. And equally, part of effective communication is that constructive feedback. So making sure that you're recognizing small achievements and making sure that everyone has a voice. So be that through the handover, be that throughout the day, or having an open door policy where somebody can come up and talk to you. And by allowing effective communication, you create an environment where team members feel comfortable expressing their ideas and their concerns. Equally, we need to understand about roles and responsibilities and expectations. And I think a lot of staff struggle with this. And ultimately, it's important that people understand the company organisation chart and they understand how authority works. Because ultimately, if everyone goes to the top, if everyone goes over your head, you're in a position where you're expected to manage a system but with no authority. And that's quite dangerous. So it's really important as the registered manager that you set the boundaries and that staff understand the organisation chart and they understand who does what and that they're not insubordinate and that they manage to follow that hierarchy because you are the registered manager. You are responsible ultimately in law. And if you don't feel that you have that voice, that becomes a very dangerous situation for you and for your registration. Ultimately, you can promote collaboration. Of course, you can. You can do that joint problem solving. You can ask why somebody feels the need to say something. You can brainstorm. You can put ideas down, and that's in that storming phase. As we're going through that performing to adjoining, we can look at the decision-making process and accountabilities, and that's why that organisation chart becomes helpful because we have layers, and not every decision necessarily lays with you. And that then hopefully cultivates a culture of mutual respect. So understanding everyone's roles and responsibilities, under sharing that shared responsibility is really important. And it gives a sense of camaraderie and collaboration. So bringing everyone on board with that shared visions and values. So it's important at the start of every shift, at every kind of team activity, that we set those clear goals and objectives. And if we look at as a team manager, we've always got a checklist, we've always got a task thing, we've always got some kind of document that tells us who's doing what. And we call that SMART goals, so specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And within those, we're able to foster collaboration and share those ideas. Part of our role of leadership is about building and maintaining that team commitment and promoting the equality, diversity, and inclusion. So leading by example is about showing that strong commitment to equality, diversity, and inclusion. So be mindful of your behaviour, be mindful of your language, be mindful of your terminology, and make sure that you're modelling that behaviour, respect, empathy, and fairness, because that's within all leadership styles about being fair. And ensure that you're acting in line with your own organisation's equality, diversity, inclusion values. Equally, communicate clearly around your equality, diversity, inclusion values, and make sure that everyone understands them within the roles and responsibilities and reinforce those meetings. And that's about understanding your staff's learning styles, for example. You may have staff that's dyslexic. So then saying to them, we'll read this policy, read that communication book, isn't inclusive to them. You may have somebody who's got ADHD, and care does attract a lot of ADHD. So therefore, giving them lots of instructions, you're just setting them up to fail because all they heard was the first instruction. Or you may have some staff with autism, highly functional autism, and therefore they've kind of got this anxiety and worry going on. And that's what I mean by this inclusion piece around equality and diversity. So really reinforcing treating everyone as an individual. And we do it for our service users. We just don't do it so well for our staff. So therefore, we need to be sensitive around cultural awareness. We need to provide those training resources and we need to really explore those difficult topics. And when we look at fostering inclusive practice, it is about creating that inclusive environment, ensuring that people feel valued, having that open door policy, looking at collaboration, teamwork, and mutual respect, fostering environments where people can feel heard. And again, we need to support the unrepresented groups where we need to look at making more steps to address the barriers which they may experience. We also need to change the biases and stereotypes. So we need to think about critical thinking, fostering narrative environments for encouraging team members, critically examining our own assumptions and our pre-prejudice there, promote self-reflection. We need to foster that open dialogue and address issues head on. We need to make sure that we're not accepting biases or stereotypes, that we do provide meaningful resources to support equality and diversity and inclusion, and that our policies and procedures are more than just pieces of paper, but they are actually ways of working. And by doing so, we can address discrimination properly, we can take swift action, we can look at lessons learned, and we can provide additional support there. When we think about promoting equal opportunities as a team leader or as a leader in a leader's role, it is about advocating for equal opportunities regardless of their backgrounds, ensuring that all parts of our processes from recruitment, selection, training, and day-to-day work is fair and transparent, and that our systems haven't got any biasness in, and that we're looking for strategies to actively promote equality. So thinking about our workforce, who are the single mums or dads? Who are the people with neurodivergence? Who are the people that struggle with reading or writing? Who are the people that struggle with, I don't know, activities and coordinations? Thinking about your staff and then looking at a strength-based approach. So redeveloping your workforce based upon what the staff can do rather than what they can't. Equally, we have within your organisation your Cultural Heritage Month, where staff can come in their formal clothing from their mother tongue countries where they come from, or indeed you could have your Pride Month when Pride comes in, or any other celebration around diversity and inclusion. We need to seek feedback all the time on what we do. So part of that internal quality improvement cycle. So we need to solicit feedback straight away. So looking at our role as a team leader, looking at how we can gather feedback about our own roles, about promoting equality and diversity, about leadership, how we as a leader create that safe space for people to be nurtured and come through, how we foster that dialogue and how we promote reflective practice as a leader. Are we doing this in team meetings? Are we doing this at handovers? How we can identify areas for improvements and lessons learned, and how we can address emerging issues. Equally, we need to think about how we can refine those strategies. And from all of this, we promote a culture of continuous learning and growth. Part of what we do is about collaboration with external partners, so engaging with other organisations and stakeholders. So that could be your mental health charities, that could be your LGBT charities, that could be your BAME charities, whatever it is, or religious organisations. Think about how you can collaborate in joint projects, how that will amplify and impact your service, and how you're going to measure that. And the more that you collaborate with external partners, the more you will be seen to be this open and transparent leader, which is truly inclusive of everyone. Again, leading by example, showing your commitment to service values, so understanding your company's and organization's values. Ensure that your actions meet the decisions and the behaviors that they need to. Constantly uphold those and the way that you interact with your service users and your team members and your stakeholders. modeling that professionalism and integrity that you expect from others. Um, is a really important part to this. And again, lead by example. So setting those standards of excellence on what you want your team to look like. When we think about your vision should align to the mission and the values of the organization, because ultimately you were employed by that company, and you were employed by that company because you did your research and because you liked their missions and values. And if you feel that the missions and values are a bit predated or don't represent a current workforce, then maybe go back to that workforce and ask them to look at the visions and missions and values, because it's the visions and values that glues the company and the staff together. That creates your purpose, goals, and priorities, and ultimately creates the compelling story techniques that's able to use when you're dealing with staff, when you're trying to sell the services to family members and customers. And equally, having strong values fed through the service and through everything that we do and touch makes it really easy to address staff performance and behaviours. We need to create those meaningful connections. We need to share those stories and testimonies. So find when things are going well and then learn from what's going well as well. Look for those positive impact statements. And again, hopefully you'll have a staff notice board somewhere where you're able to share what's going well within your organization. And we're learning from our complaints as well. And that's about being open and transparent, maybe having a board for, this was a complaint, this is what was said, this is what we did. And obviously think about confidentiality and safeguarding. We need to then look at the impacts. We do an impact statement. Who does this affect? How does this affect? What do we learn from this? And what can we do as a shared effort? And from creating those meaningful connections, hopefully you foster a sense of purpose and pride, because if you celebrate those stories, you bring people on board, you make everyone feel heard, everyone then buys into that mission and values about what we're here for. And to celebrate that achievement gives everyone a sense of purpose and pride within their work. So when we empower and involve team members, we're really encouraging everyone to play their part. We're involving team members, encouraging them to participate in this decision making, being democratic. We're empowering them to take ownership of their own work, so we're enabling. And we're recognising and celebrating achievements there as well. We want to develop a positive value-based culture within our team. And there's lots of different models around core positive values, but we need to encourage our team members to collaborate in a process to identify and prioritise those core values. We need to communicate those values and have clear communication, use various channels such as meetings, emails, posters, and training sessions to get that buy-in, to create that change mechanism, if you like. We need to clearly articulate the core values to the team. We need to provide examples and stories that illustrate how the values are put into practice, and we need to encourage open and honest communication. The integrity values into policy and procedures, so making sure that our policy and procedures represent those values. And equally, when we think about the single inspection framework now, they're common themes that are meant to be running through everything that we do. Again, leading by example, so the whole organization demonstrates those values. So from the hierarchy, the CEO, the owners, the register managers, the deputy managers, your team leaders, all following that same organizational value and all being there as a role model. You need to provide training and development opportunities. We know this, it's a CQC requirement, but around the values and through your training, including those values in all of those training. Throughout all of the opportunities, creating that culture of open communication and sharing feedback. And again, recognising and rewarding that behaviour that aligns to those values. And it hasn't got to be financial increments. It could be employee of the week, employee of the month. It could just be a thank you card. It could be a certificate system. It could be an email. It could be anything to recognize um, and incentivize. Equally, we need to address the values that are misaligned. So when people are in breach of what we as team leaders are trying to create, how do we deal with that? So we have a policy. Let's say one of our values is that we create a culture of empowerment. And let's say we've got carers washing and changing people who are able to do it for themselves. How do we manage that? How do we communicate that? And that's why values are really important, because when you have misalignment to your values, you can sit down with that member of staff and say, look, I've noticed that you have been washing Mary's face and hands, but look at her care plan. She's actually able to do this herself. I wonder, by looking at our values, which value do you think you're not meeting by doing this? And then hopefully they'll go, oh, enablement. Great. Because the more they understand about their role and how everything links back to the values, the less likely it is you've got to start dealing with misalignments. But equally, when you interview staff, you can do value-based interviewing. When you do supervisions, value-based supervisions, appraisals can be value-based, feedback can be value-based, training can be value-based. Everything comes back to, why are we all here? And we can address that, and we can address really good performance measurements through value-based. And when we look at progress reviews and we look at all of those systems, we have our key business indicators. You know, we want to create a safe environment. We want this to happen. We want that to happen. Is that happening more now because the whole team are on board with our value-based systems? We've talked about recognising achievements. I'm not going to go over that again. We equally need to provide support and resources. So we need to ensure effective performance. So in other words, everyone's had the same opportunities to understand the values. Have they had training? Have they had support? Have they had supervision? Have they all read the policies? Think about equality and diversity. Have we made those reasonable adjustments? If somebody's dyslexic, why am I giving them a load of policies to read and asking them to sign it? Have I sat down with them and done a one-to-one? Maybe you could do the policies as an MP3, so they're read to them. And once we've met that equality and diversity piece, and once we've got around that effective performance management, then we can address any barriers. And equally, we can show empathy and understanding towards team members if we understand any equality and diversity issues. Promoting that positive culture then is about fostering an inclusive environment, about how you manage and address conflict, how you work together as a team, and how you communicate effectively, and again, how you celebrate. So provide that ongoing feedback as a team leader. Look at regular feedback and recognitions. Look at constructive feedback and how you give constructive feedback, multiple methods and styles up there. But an inclusive leader will ask somebody, say, look, how do you want your feedback? I'm not a massive fan of the praise sandwich. I get lost in it. It doesn't work for me. But I would ask you and say, look, okay, I'm going to give you some feedback. I just want to watch your feedback style. What do you prefer? Some people prefer the honesty. Some people prefer the praise sandwich. Some people prefer just a little bit. Because what you don't want to do is get the message lost. But think about the language that you use, and then it's empowering and promoting. Obviously, lead with passion and enthusiasm. Look at those personal commitments. Show that you are genuine, that you're interested in your staff, that you're interested in your stakeholders, and that you're interested in your service users. Communicate your visions and make sure that your visions align to your company's values, and promote and maintain that positive environment throughout. Continually look for that reinforcement commitment as a team leader, as in leadership. Look for those ongoing communications. Look for opportunities to reinforce stuff. Reinforce it through your normal working role, and then obviously look for opportunities to encourage others to do the same. Provide those resources, be it electronic, technological books, look at training and guidance, look at guidance and coaching opportunities. So what staff have you got that can help coach and cultivate your staff, and look for that mentorship part. So if you've got a member of staff who's really struggling with your values, then obviously maybe a mentor. And that's the other thing. When we work in social care, We have staff that come over and work with us, and just because they've done an online course does not mean that they understand your home's values and visions. So it's important that you do that. We've obviously talked about that. We need to establish clear processes and systems. So staff should understand the decision-making process. They should understand how it comes around, that decision-making processes aren't that simple. I know they think it is, but you've got the whole single inspection framework to think about. You've got the nice guidelines to think about. You've got environmental health guidelines. You've got your staff policies and procedures. You've got personal-centered practices. It's not easy being a registered manager. Moving into the problem solving, looking for those strengths and weaknesses, the analysis through it is going to be key to top leadership. Root cause analysis, asking why 7 times, really drilling down, and then looking at that conflict resolution. So understanding how to manage conflict is key. Accountability is crucial as a team leader. And part of that is making sure that you foster a culture of mutual accountability. So just because I'm the manager doesn't mean it's my fault. Just because you're the cook or the cleaner or the department head or the carer or whoever, we are all accountable. We all have a duty of care and we are all working towards those common goals and values. So we're all accountable. And by holding everyone accountable, you'll get peer pressure, you'll get teams working together to make sure that things are working better rather than silo working. I'm not a fan of silo working. It's not teamwork. There's no I in me working on my own. We should be working as part of that collaborative team and sharing those ideas. And again, for those feedbacks. It is about building relationships and going back to the very first couple of slides, looking at Tuckman's theory. A lot of businesses get stuck in storming and they don't know how to move on from that. So finally, looking at performing and those leadership approaches, during the leadership stages, the team is functioning as part to its peak with high levels of cooperation, productivity, and performance. Leaders should adopt a delegative or transformative leadership style to empower team members. Remember, if you're doing the work, you haven't empowered your team. And as I've always said to my team, if I'm standing there drinking a cup of tea, I'm doing something right because it means I've empowered you all to do your jobs properly. If I'm out on the floor and I'm having to do everything, then it shows that I haven't got trust in my team and that I'm concerned. We should be delegating that decision making. We should be promoting innovation and we should be promoting that continuous improvement. So enabling people to speak up. Going to the adjourning part then, in the adjourning stages, the team looks at new projects and roles. Leaders will adopt and support and coach leadership styles to facilitate a closer process to celebrate achievements and acknowledging those contributions. So again, when you're at the top and your staff are all hitting where they need to hit, you can then look at redeveloping your team. So your takeaways from this is about being adaptive, having that adaptive leadership style, which is what we call the inclusive leader. It reflects the different stages in the cycle that you need to be. It looks at team development, it looks at the team's support, it looks at their growth, their coherence, their performance. It looks at empathy, it looks at situational awareness, and it looks at those key qualities for leaders to facilitate a productive team dynamic process. Remember to promote those equality and diversity and inclusion pieces throughout your work. And it's not about age, sex, colour, we've got that. We understand that. It's more about capability. It's more about the barriers that stop people performing their roles. So around culture, is there a piece on cultural diversity or cultural awareness that we need to put a piece of work in here? Remember, as a leader, it's essential to model and promote those values that recognise and champion equality and diversity and inclusion. That includes treating all team members with respect and fairness regardless of their background or identity. Leaders should actively challenge from any form of discrimination or exclusion within their team and organisation. And this can be done by creating a safe, inclusive environment where everyone feels valued. So when we look now at your unit 1B and we go to Canvas, you will have, let's go back here. You will have the first block of learning. So learn, oh, we're jumping a bit. The first block of learning looks at adapting leadership styles. We've talked about that, about building trust, maintaining commitment, looking at those new strategies and modeling those values. And you've got your first reflective piece of writing to do there. And it's looking for an example about you build your own teams. Then we're looking at being able to manage teamwork. So looking at objectives, setting goals, providing feedback, and recognise and reward and recognition. And again, you have your second assignment there with a reading list at the bottom. Throughout this module, you've heard me talk about resources and resource management, and that will be our next module, module 7A, where we look at resource management. And that will bring us to the end of theme 1. So thanks for watching, and I wish you all the best of luck.